Hey everyone, are you ready to explore how much your thoughts can impact your health?
I'm ready.
It's a question a lot of you had, so we're taking a deep dive into this YouTube interview with Dr. Joe Dispenza.
He's fascinating.
He really is. He spent years researching this connection between the mind and body, and some of the things he talks about are seriously mind-blowing.
I know. The stories he shares about people transforming their health just by changing their thoughts are amazing.
So in this deep dive, we'll unpack his ideas. But this isn't just theory. We're looking for actionable techniques and real-world examples of change.
I think we can definitely find that in this interview.
Let's jump in. One of the first things that struck me was Dr. Dispenza's idea of programming.
Yeah, that's a powerful concept.
He suggests that by age 35, like 95% of us are basically running on autopilot.
It's like we're puppets and our programming is the puppet master.
Right? He actually uses that analogy, the puppet master.
Yeah. It's a vivid way to describe how our habits, thoughts, and even our emotions can control us.
I don't know about you, but hitting 30 recently, that idea makes me a little nervous.
Oh yeah, I can see why.
Is this programming really that influential?
Well, think about it this way. Our brains are constantly learning and adapting.
Right.
Nerve cells that fire together, wire together, as the saying goes.
So the more we repeat certain thoughts, actions, or feelings, the more ingrained they become.
Exactly. And it's not that our brains are working against us. It's more like we need to understand how this programming works so we can work with it instead of letting it control us.
So how much power do our thoughts really have? Can they really transform our health?
That's a big question.
I mean, I've heard the saying mind over matter, but can we really go beyond just habits and make real changes to our well-being just by changing our thoughts?
Dr. Dispenza thinks so. He believes our thoughts are incredibly powerful.
Okay, but what about genetics or past traumas? Are those things just too set in stone to change with our minds?
There are definitely people who believe that some things, especially childhood traumas, are just too hardwired to change.
Right, that makes sense.
But Dr. Dispenza's research challenges that. He's seen some truly incredible transformations. Like he's worked with people who have reversed some seriously challenging health conditions.
What kind of conditions?
Stage 4 cancer, chronic illnesses. He even tells a story about a woman who regrew her thyroid after it had been surgically removed.
Regrew her thyroid?
Yeah, I know, sounds unbelievable.
Hold on, are these scientifically documented cases? Or are we talking anecdotes here?
He documents his work rigorously. That's what makes it so compelling. He's blending scientific data with these incredible stories. It's not just feel-good fluff.
That's impressive. So it's like he's saying, look, here's the science, and here are real people who have defied the odds.
Right.
Okay, you mentioned these incredible stories. Anything that particularly stands out to you?
There's one about an NFL player with MS who was confined to a wheelchair.
Oh, wow.
He describes his healing as coming from learning to love himself, and incredibly, he actually stood up from that wheelchair.
That's powerful.
It's a testament to the power of belief, that we can change even when things seem impossible.
I'm definitely intrigued, but I have to ask, how does this transformation actually happen?
Well, Dr. Dispenza lays out this clear model for change. It all starts with information.
Yeah.
New knowledge literally creates new neural pathways in the brain. And science, as he points out, is the closest thing we have to truth, so it can help us move past doubt and fear.
So information helps us create new possibilities.
Exactly.
But just knowing something isn't enough to change, right?
You're right. It's not like reading a self-help book and suddenly your life is transformed.
So what's the next step?
Repetition and teaching.
Interesting.
Dr. Dispenza says the best way to really learn something is to teach it.
That's a good tip for anyone listening. If you want to understand something deeply, try explaining to someone else.
Exactly. It forces you to really engage with the material and make it your own.
So we have the information, we've internalized it, now what?
Then it's about putting it into practice, right? We have to move from knowing to doing. Dr. Dispenza calls this the experience phase. Taking action, creating new experiences really strengthens those new neural pathways.
Makes sense. But does all this lead to an actual emotional change?
That's the key, really. It's not just about understanding the concept, it's about feeling it.
So it's about embodying it emotionally, not just intellectually.
Exactly. And that's when lasting change starts to happen.
That sounds simple enough when you put it that way.
Yeah.
Align our thoughts, actions, and feelings. Boom, transformation.
Right. But of course, it's not always that easy.
I know I have some habits I'd love to break, even though I know better.
What kinds of things?
Oh, the usual late night snacking, things like that.
Yeah.
Why is it so hard to change even when we want to? What are the biggest roadblocks we face?
Well, one common misconception is that our thoughts don't really matter. We might think, oh, it's just a thought, no big deal.
Yeah,
But we already talked about that 95% programming. Our thoughts are way more powerful than we realize.
true. What else holds us back?
Another big one is waiting for external change before we change ourselves. We tell ourselves, I'll start being healthier once I get a new job, or I'll be happier when I find a new apartment.
Oh yeah, I've definitely fallen into that trap.
It's so easy to do, but real change starts within, regardless of our external circumstances.
So how do we actually make those internal changes?
How about we use your late night snacking as an example?
Sure, I'm all ears.
Dr. Dispenza talks about the power of mental rehearsal. Basically, we can train our brains for new behaviors just by using our imagination.
Really? Just by imagining it?
It sounds crazy, but there's a study he talks about. It was with piano players. The ones who just mentally rehearsed playing scales actually developed the same neural pathways as those who physically practice.
No way. That's amazing. So just by imagining ourselves making different choices, we can create real change in our brains.
Exactly. It's like creating a blueprint for the future you want. So let's say you're craving that late night snack.
Oh, I know that feeling all too well.
Instead of giving in, take a moment to visualize yourself making a different choice. Picture yourself saying no to the snack. Rehearse that in your mind.
Okay.
Feel that sense of empowerment and self-control. The more you practice this mental rehearsal, the easier it will become to actually make that choice in real life.
So we're not just mentally rehearsing the action, but also the emotion behind it.
That's key. It's about conditioning your body to feel the emotions you want to experience. So instead of feeling guilt or regret after giving in to the craving, imagine feeling proud of yourself for making a different choice. Feel the energy and vitality that comes with taking control of your health.
So powerful. But what about those times when we slip up? Even when we're making progress, we sometimes fall back into old patterns. What causes that?
It often comes down to unconscious triggers, things that evoke familiar emotions and pull us back into old behaviors without us even realizing it.
Oh, wow. So it's like those old programs are still running in the background even when we're consciously trying to change.
Exactly. It's tricky. He gives an example of someone who had a traumatic experience in France as a kid. Years later, they go back to France and unconsciously start overeating. They don't even consciously connect it to that past trauma, but it's still influencing them.
Wow, that makes so much sense. So how do we break free from these unconscious patterns and truly create lasting change?
Dr. Dispenza is a big believer in the power of the first hour of the day.
Interesting.
He says our subconscious is super suggestible when we first wake up, so that time is crucial for setting intentions and really reprogramming our minds.
So are you suggesting ditching the morning phone scroll and doing something more intentional?
Dr. Dispenza takes this to the extreme. He wakes up at 4:30 every morning and spends 2 hours doing focused intentions and meditation.
Wow, that's hardcore.
It is. He calls this his think box and play box time. In his think box time, he intentionally decides how he wants to think, act, and feel that day. And then in his play box time, he puts it into practice through meditation, trying to really embody the state he wants to be in.
That's quite the routine. But I guess what you're saying is we don't all have to wake up at 4:30. But we could try swapping a little bit of that mindless phone time for some intentional reflection or meditation.
Right. Even just a few minutes can make a difference.
That's encouraging. So we've talked about meditation a few times now. What's so special about it? Why has Dr. Dispenza put so much emphasis on it?
He believes that meditation, specifically the type he teaches, is key to creating something he calls coherence, both in the brain and heart.
Coherence. What does that mean, and how do we know if we're in that state?
Think about what it feels like when you're stressed. Your thoughts are racing, your body feels tense.
Oh yeah, I know that feeling all too well.
That's incoherence. Your brain is kind of firing all over the place, out of sync. But meditation, especially when you're focusing on expanding your awareness, brings everything back into alignment.
So it's about quieting the mental chatter and finding a sense of inner calm, even amidst the chaos.
Yes. And this state of coherence has real effects on the body, not just the mind. Well, one thing he talks about is something called heart rate variability.
Heart rate variability.
It's a measure of how adaptable your heart rate is. When you're in a coherent state, your heart beats in a more rhythmic, flexible way.
That's interesting.
And it's linked to all sorts of good things like lower stress, better focus, and even a stronger immune system.
Wow, so it's not just about feeling good. It's about being healthier overall.
Exactly.
But for a lot of us, meditation can seem intimidating. Like,
Yeah.
do I really need to sit cross-legged on a cushion for hours to get these benefits?
Not necessarily. Dr. Dispenza's approach goes beyond traditional methods.
In what way?
It's less about the external form and more about cultivating an internal state of coherence.
So it's about shifting our attention inward instead of being so focused on everything happening around us.
Exactly. It's about finding that stillness within.
Okay, I'm starting to get it. But how do we actually make these practices a part of our daily lives? I mean, things get so busy, it's hard to find the time.
That's where the power of routine comes in. Dr. Dispenza really stresses the importance of a morning routine. Those first few minutes of the day can set the tone for everything that follows.
So instead of grabbing our phones first thing in the morning,
Exactly. Try dedicating even just a few minutes to practices that cultivate coherence, like meditation, breath work, or even just sitting in silence and appreciating the present moment.
okay, I can definitely see the value in that. Even a few minutes seems more manageable than I thought. But what about those of us who just aren't morning people? Can we do this in the evening instead?
The key is to find what works for you and make it non-negotiable. It's about creating a consistent practice that fits into your life, not just adding another thing to your to-do list.
So it's less about forcing ourselves into a specific mold and more about finding what feels natural and sustainable.
Exactly.
Okay, that makes sense. But what about those moments when we feel like we're slipping back into old patterns? Those negative thoughts creeping in, even when we're trying to stay positive. What advice does Dr. Dispenza give for dealing with those challenges and staying on track with our transformation?
It all circles back to self-awareness.
Interesting.
When you notice yourself spiraling into negativity, just pause. Observe those thoughts and feelings without judgment. It's easier said than done, but that's where regular meditation really helps.
Wow, so
The more you practice that internal observation, the easier it becomes to detach from those habitual patterns and just watch them come and go without getting swept away.
it's about training our minds to be less reactive and more aware of what's happening inside.
Exactly. And it's a skill you can develop over time with consistent practice.
I like that.
Okay.
But what about those really deep-seated beliefs, the ones we've carried for years, even decades? How do we even begin to address those?
Dr. Dispenza has this fascinating technique he calls mental rehearsal.
Mental rehearsal.
It's about consciously creating new neural pathways by repeatedly imagining yourself embodying the beliefs and behaviors you want.
So it's kind of like rewiring our brains by using our imagination.
Exactly. Remember that study with the piano players? Their brains couldn't tell the difference between physical practice and mental rehearsal. It's powerful stuff.
So if we can vividly visualize ourselves living in alignment with our desired beliefs, are we actually creating real change in our brains?
He thinks so, and his research backs it up. His team actually uses advanced brain imaging techniques like fMRIs and EEGs to see what's happening. And they've documented real changes in brain activity that correlate with practices like meditation and mental rehearsal.
So we're not just talking about wishful thinking. There's actually neurological evidence that these practices work.
Exactly. The mind-body connection is real, and we have the power to shape it.
Okay, I'm starting to see the power of these techniques, but I'm curious, does Dr. Dispenza ever talk about things beyond the purely scientific? Like, does he ever delve into more mystical aspects of human potential?
He does.
Like what?
While he's always grounded in science, he's not afraid to explore those areas that are still a bit mysterious. For example, he talks about the pineal gland, that tiny gland in the center of our brains.
Okay.
He suggests that it might be the seat of the soul, and when activated, it can act like a radio receiver, allowing us to tap into frequencies and information that are beyond our normal senses.
Wow, that's getting into some pretty uncharted territory.
Right.
So are we talking about things like psychic abilities or intuition?
He seems to think those things are possible. He suggests that practices like meditation, when done consistently and deeply, can help us access these latent abilities.
That's fascinating. So it's about pushing the boundaries of what we think is possible and exploring the full potential of human consciousness.
Exactly. And I think that's what makes his work so exciting. It's not just about fixing what's wrong, it's about discovering what we're truly capable of.
I like that. It's about expanding our understanding of ourselves and the universe.
Exactly. It's about pushing the boundaries and exploring those frontiers of human consciousness.
Well, this deep dive has already been quite a journey, and we're just getting started.
There's so much to uncover.
In the next part, we'll explore Dr. Dispenza's views on collective consciousness. The idea that we're all interconnected and can influence reality through our combined thoughts and intentions.
That's where it gets really wild.
I can't wait to dive in.
Mm-hmm.
All right, collective consciousness. We're all connected. Our thoughts have power. This is definitely venturing into some fascinating territory. Isn't this veering into the realm of, well, let's be honest, kind of out there stuff?
It might sound that way, but Dr. Dispenza grounds this concept in both scientific research and real-world examples.
Oh,
Like, he points to studies on these peace gatherings.
peace gatherings.
Yeah, where large groups of people meditate on peace and harmony. And during these gatherings, there's often a measurable decrease in things like crime and violence and even accidents in the surrounding area. Pretty remarkable, right?
That's pretty wild. So you're telling me that a group of people meditating can actually impact the world around them.
Yeah.
I mean, is there a scientific explanation for that, or are we talking about some kind of mystical energy field?
Well, he talks about this field of consciousness that goes beyond just our individual minds. He describes it as this web of energy that connects us all. And when enough people align their intentions, they can create kind of a ripple effect in this field, and that can influence events in the world.
Okay, I'll admit I'm a little skeptical,
Uh-huh.
but I'm open to hearing more. So what does this mean for us as individuals? If we're all connected and our thoughts have this kind of power, how do we harness that for positive change?
He talks about becoming conscious creators.
Conscious creators.
Yeah. He really challenges us to ask ourselves, what kind of world do I want to live in? What kind of energy do I want to contribute? And then align your thoughts, your feelings, your actions with that vision. It's a shift from me to we.
So taking responsibility for our own energy and recognizing that we're all part of something much bigger, that's a powerful concept.
But before we get too carried away with, transforming the world, I want to bring it back to personal transformation for a bit. Dr. Dispenza talks a lot about the conscious and subconscious mind. What's the difference, and why is that distinction so important?
It's crucial if we want to create lasting change,
Okay.
because we need to understand how these two parts of our minds work. So the conscious mind, which is about 5% of our mental activity, that's where we analyze and reason and make decisions. It's the thinking part of our brain.
Okay. That's the part that's aware of our thoughts and actions.
Right. But the subconscious mind is the real powerhouse.
Okay.
And that's operating below our conscious awareness. And it's this vast storehouse of all our memories and beliefs, these automatic programs that are running in the background, driving most of our behavior.
So it's like the operating system running in the background, but we don't even really see it.
But if we're not even aware of it, how can we change those deeply ingrained patterns, the things that are holding us back?
That's the challenge.
Yeah.
Trying to change those deep-seated habits and beliefs with just our conscious mind is like trying to rewire a computer by only using the keyboard. It's not going to get you very far.
That's a good analogy.
So Dr. Dispenza believes meditation is the key to accessing and reprogramming the subconscious mind.
Okay, meditation again.
Yeah.
But for a lot of people, meditation seems intimidating. It conjures up these images of sitting cross-legged on a cushion for hours on end. Do we really need to do that?
Not at all.
Okay, good.
His approach goes beyond just those traditional methods. It's about creating this coherent state of being, both mentally and emotionally.
You've mentioned coherence a few times now. What does that actually feel like? Paint me a picture.
Imagine a sense of deep inner peace, clarity, and connectedness.
Okay, I like that.
Your thoughts, feelings, your body are all in sync, working together harmoniously. And this state actually has measurable effects on our physiology.
Measurable effects, like what?
Well, one key indicator is heart rate variability.
Okay.
When we're in this coherent state, our heart beats in a more rhythmic, adaptable pattern.
Interesting.
And this is linked to reduced stress, improved focus, and even a stronger immune system.
Wow, so it's not just about feeling good, it's about being healthier overall.
Exactly.
So how do we get there? How do we cultivate this coherence in our everyday lives?
It's about shifting our attention.
Shifting our attention.
Yeah. From the external world to our inner world.
Okay.
So instead of getting caught up in that constant mental chatter, we're focusing on our breath, our body sensations, or even just the feeling of spaciousness within.
That sounds incredibly peaceful.
Mm.
But how do we actually integrate these practices into our busy lives?
Dr. Dispenza, he's a big advocate for morning routines.
Morning routines.
He sees that first hour of the day as a chance to really prime our minds to set intentions for the day ahead.
So instead of reaching for our phones first thing in the morning, we could be setting intentions.
Exactly. Even just 10 or 15 minutes each morning can make a huge difference. Dedicate that time to practices that cultivate coherence, like meditation, breath work, even just sitting in silence and appreciating the present moment.
Okay, that sounds doable. That's a lot less intimidating than I thought. But what if mornings just aren't realistic? Can we do this at any time of day?
Absolutely. The key is finding a time that works for you and making it non-negotiable. The magic happens when you're consistent. We're building new habits that support our well-being.
So whether you're an early bird or a night owl, the key is to make time for these practices and stick with them. But what about those moments when we feel ourselves slipping back into old patterns, those negative thoughts creeping in? How do we stay motivated and overcome those challenges?
It really all circles back to self-awareness.
Self-awareness.
When you notice yourself getting caught up in negativity, just pause for a moment. Observe those patterns without judgment. And this is where a regular meditation practice can be so helpful.
How so?
The more you practice, the easier it becomes to simply observe those thoughts and emotions from a detached perspective, almost like you're watching a movie.
So it's about building that mental muscle, training our minds to be less reactive to everything.
Exactly.
That makes sense. But what about those beliefs that seem so deeply ingrained, the ones we've been carrying for years, even decades? How do we even begin to address those? Are those even possible to change?
Dr. Dispenza has this really intriguing technique he calls mental rehearsal.
Mental rehearsal.
Yeah, it's about rewiring our brains by consciously creating new neural pathways. You do this by repeatedly imagining yourself embodying the beliefs and behaviors you want. Remember that study about the piano players?
Yeah.
Their brains couldn't distinguish between the physical practice and mental rehearsal.
That's so cool. So by vividly visualizing ourselves living in alignment with our desired beliefs, we're actually making real changes in our brains.
He believes so, and he has some really interesting research to back it up. His team actually uses advanced brain imaging techniques like fMRIs and EEGs to track these changes.
Wow, so it's not just wishful thinking. There's actual evidence that this works.
There is. They've found that regular meditation and mental rehearsal can actually lead to increased activity in the prefrontal cortex.
Okay, and remind me, the prefrontal cortex is the part of the brain responsible for
Higher level thinking, decision-making, planning. It's kind of like the CEO of our brains.
So we're basically strengthening the CEO of our minds through these practices.
Exactly. And the best part is these changes aren't temporary. We're talking about creating lasting structural and functional changes in the brain.
So it's not just a quick fix. These practices have the potential to truly transform us on a deep level.
He thinks so.
Okay, I'm really starting to see the power of these techniques. But part of me still wonders if Dr. Dispenza ever delves into the more mystical aspects of human potential. Does he ever talk about things like intuition or psychic abilities, even life after death?
He does.
Really?
While he's grounded in science, he's also open to exploring those realms that go beyond our current understanding.
Like what?
Well, for example, he talks about the pineal gland.
The pineal gland.
A tiny gland in the center of our brains.
Yeah.
He suggests it might be the seat of the soul, and that when it's activated, it can act like a radio receiver, allowing us to tap into frequencies and information that are beyond our normal senses.
Okay, now we're getting into some really uncharted territory.
Yeah.
So are we talking about unlocking psychic abilities or some kind of sixth sense?
He believes those things are possible.
Wow.
He suggests that practices like meditation, when done consistently and deeply, can actually help us access those latent abilities.
So it's about pushing the boundaries of what we think is possible and really exploring the full spectrum of human consciousness.
Exactly. And that's what I think makes his work so exciting. It's not just about fixing what's wrong, it's about discovering what we're truly capable of.
I like that. It's about expanding our understanding of ourselves and the universe.
Exactly. It's about pushing the boundaries and exploring those frontiers of human consciousness.
Well, this deep dive has already been quite a journey.
It has.
And we're just getting started. In this next part, we'll explore Dr. Dispenza's views on collective consciousness, this idea that we're all interconnected and can influence reality through our combined thoughts and intentions.
That's when things get really wild.
I can't wait to dive in. That's a pretty bold claim. Is there any scientific basis for that, or are we talking about some kind of mystical energy field?
He sees it as tapping into this field of consciousness that connects us all. It's like we're all part of this vast web of energy. And when enough people align their intentions, they can create a ripple effect in this field, influencing events in the world.
Okay, I'll admit this is pushing the boundaries of my understanding a bit. So what does this mean for us on a personal level? If our thoughts have this kind of power, how do we harness that for positive change in our own lives?
Dr. Dispenza emphasizes becoming conscious creators. He challenges us to ask ourselves, what kind of world do I want to live in? What kind of energy do I want to contribute? And then align your thoughts, your feelings, your actions with that vision. It's a shift from me to we.
So taking responsibility for our own energy and recognizing that we're all part of something much bigger, that's a powerful concept. All this talk about thoughts shaping reality kind of reminds me of the law of attraction. Is that what Dr. Dispenza is talking about?
It's similar, but Dr. Dispenza goes deeper than just attracting material things. He emphasizes aligning our energy with the energy of the universe. It's about becoming aware of our thoughts, feelings, and actions, and consciously choosing those that are in harmony with our highest good.
So it's not just about thinking positive thoughts. It's about aligning our entire being with our desires.
Exactly. And a big part of that alignment is cultivating gratitude and appreciation. Instead of focusing on what we lack, we focus on what we have, even the simple things. This shift in perspective creates a more positive, energetic vibration that attracts more good things into our lives.
That makes sense. So it's not just about wishful thinking. It's about actively creating the reality we desire through our thoughts, feelings, and actions. But I have to admit, even with all this talk about the power of the mind, part of me is still skeptical. Is there any real scientific evidence to support these claims, or is it just a bunch of feel-good fluff?
Dr. Dispenza's work is deeply rooted in science. He and his team use advanced brain imaging techniques to study the effects of meditation and mental rehearsal on the brain, and they've documented real, measurable changes in brain activity that correspond with these practices.
So it's not just a placebo effect. There's actual neurological evidence to support this.
Yes, and that's what makes his work so compelling. He bridges the gap between science and spirituality, showing us that we have the power to create profound changes in our lives and in the world around us.
This is truly mind-blowing stuff. But I have one final question before we wrap things up. Dr. Dispenza talks about the importance of becoming supernatural. What exactly does he mean by that? Is he talking about developing superhuman powers?
Not quite. When he talks about becoming supernatural, he's referring to tapping into those latent human potentials that we often dismiss as mystical or woo-woo. It's about going beyond our limited sense of self and accessing those extraordinary capabilities that lie dormant within each of us.
Okay, that's intriguing, but also a little intimidating. How do we even begin to tap into those supernatural abilities?
He believes it starts with shifting our perception of what's possible. We often limit ourselves by our beliefs and what we've been told is normal or realistic, but he encourages us to question those limitations and entertain the possibility that we're capable of far more than we realize.
So it's about expanding our minds and opening ourselves up to new possibilities.
Exactly. And he suggests that practices like meditation, mindfulness, and energy healing can help us rewire our brains and access those dormant potentials. It's about training our minds to operate at a higher frequency, becoming more sensitive to subtle energies, and tapping into the wisdom of our intuition.
Wow, this deep dive has been a wild ride. I feel like my mind is overflowing with new insights and possibilities.
It's been quite a journey, hasn't it? From exploring the power of our thoughts to shape our reality to discovering the untapped potential within each of us, Dr. Dispenza's work offers a profound message of hope and empowerment.
Absolutely. It's clear that we're capable of far more than we often give ourselves credit for. But before we go, I want to leave our listeners with a final thought-provoking question that Dr. Dispenza often poses. If you were president, what laws would you implement to make our lives better? What changes would you make to create a world that's more peaceful and more aligned with our highest potential?
It's something to really ponder.
We'd love to hear your thoughts, share your ideas with us on social media, and let's continue this conversation. And for those of you who want to delve deeper into Dr. Dispenza's work, be sure to check out his website and his latest book. Thank you for joining us on this incredible deep dive into the power of the mind. Remember, you are a powerful creator, and the possibilities for transformation are limitless. Until next time, keep exploring, keep expanding, and keep believing in the power of your own transformation.